to the task force? I guess not.
I also don't know who's online, do we?
I can't tell. I don't think anybody's online.
Well, I assume you asked the question.
Well,
because visually, I was nobody been read it.
let's try.
That's us, I guess. What we get.
Nope. Okay. Now how do we get rid of this?
It doesn't matter, it's recorded, so.
Okay, we'll leave it the way it is, like this. Okay. So the big announcement is that we have a new member to the task force, and I learned about this first when my wife pointed out to me that at the town council meeting earlier this week on Tuesday, there was a list of new appointees to various boards and commissions, and Liz went down the list and said, "Do you know someone's being appointed to the task force?" I said, "No." And there was this guy by the name of Paul Fox. And so this is an interesting backstory. So I, at that point, went to Google and Paul Fox, and I got Paul Fox Mystic. I thought, okay, that's good. He lives in Mystic. And then question is, where in Mystic? And so then I did a little more search, and it turns out that Paul lives at 2 Essex Avenue, which is on Willow Point. And in fact, this is the house that was featured in the article that was written about the task force back a year and a half ago, I guess it was, by the Hartford Current. And the aerial view you're looking at is his house, and it's the one that has issues with a combination of sea level rise and
No, you mean a normal sea level?
normal sea level rise and
The one that's gonna disappear.
right. So and then to make this all more interesting is that there was a meeting last week in Noank, and I saw this guy at the meeting, and I came out and said, "Hi, I'm Zell Stever. Who are you?" And the guy says, "I'm Paul Fox," and that was the end of it. And I was like, "Okay," but I didn't remember that.
Oh,
And then I remembered that Jesse had told me about Paul, and so then it all clicked. And so this morning I made a phone call, and I'd gotten a note from Betsy McCousher, our town clerk, that the town council had passed the motion appointing Paul to the task force. And so
that's very good. It really is.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
yes, and so I did have a cup of coffee with Paul at 11 o'clock this morning, because I figured I better make sure I remembered who that face was that I introduced myself to a week before. And so he's here joining us, and I think we're very pleased, Paul, to have you on board.
I'm very pleased to be here.
So do you want to just take a moment and just tell us very briefly, sort of how long you've been here, and sort of just a little bit about, and then I think we'll go around and tell you who we are, so that we have a proper sort of thing here.
I've been in town for about 27 years. We got our house down on Lower Point back in '97. And when we were getting ready to retire, we rebuilt and made it our permanent residence. So we've been in town for 27 years, and we've lived here for about 15. So I don't know how much of a background.
Just a little bit about,
Yeah, during work, I was a nuclear engineer in the health business, and I've worked at Electric Boat. I worked for a radio pharmaceutical operation, and I spent the bulk of my time working for a group of insurance companies for the nuclear industry around the country. I've BS from Northeastern and an MBA from New Haven, and
I think the other part that you all need to know is that he has had some experience with government. And you can go ahead and tell us a little bit about that. This is what's
I
amazing.
Started in the late '80s, and I was just kind of like by accident. I was involved in the Michael Dukakis campaign. That's where I met Jesse, and we were delegates at the Democratic National Convention that year. After that, I got involved with the town politics, kind of probably the reverse of what you should do, but I started at the top and worked my way down. But but eventually I was Democratic town chairman in Avon, Connecticut. I served on the Board of Finance and on the Inland Wetlands Commission in town.
So I think that's a terrific a skill set that you bring to the task force. So by the way, when you talk, take your microphone and push the button, and it should turn green. So Frank, you want to start and just tell
Frank Boland, I'm a physical oceanographer.
no, it's that, no, that one.
The one with the mouth.
This right here, Frank.
Right in the front. Okay, see, you talk now that it doesn't turn green. Yeah.
Turn green without talking. Physical oceanographer, professor emeritus at the University of Connecticut. And physical guys work on waves and currents and the like. And so I'm around here looking at coastal erosion and done a lot of work on coastal erosion over the years. I've been in Connecticut for a long time now, Mystic, Connecticut for a long time.
I don't think I need to do this. Paul knows me pretty well. But importantly, he's also a sailor.
This one.
Oh,
Mickey Weiss.
Okay, and I also live in Mystic. I founded Project Oceanology over at Yukon Avery Point in 1972 and was the director there for 30 years. Continue there doing research on lobsters and crabs is my specialty. I'm quite involved with the Long Island Sound Management Program run by the EPA, having been a chairperson of the Citizen Advisory Committee, and I'm still on that committee. So that's been a link to Long Island Sound bigger picture.
Maggie, go ahead.
I don't know. It's green. I'm Maggie Jones. I've lived here all my life and I'm a landscape ecologist. I just finished a 30-year career as the executive director at a local nature center, the Pequot Seapost, and I'm involved in all kinds of different things, landscape and conservation wise.
And just, I'm Zell Stever, and I'm retired federal employee who started out here in the state of Connecticut as director of water resources, then moved on to Washington and worked at a number of agencies. The most notable one was I was at one point assigned to the State Department to help negotiate the Earth Summit. And so that really what got me involved with sustainable development. And I've been on a variety of commissions here in town, and been retired for 20 years and lived here and now in Noank. So that's that. Okay. Any questions for us? Okay. Okay. So next, let me get this right here. We have a under new business. I'll get announcements at the end so that we can do that quickly. I had asked if the Office of Planning and Development would come and talk about the climate action plan and other proposals that are going on, including the update on the POCD. And they were unavailable for this meeting, and so I put it to be determined, and obviously it'll be it next time we do that. I wanted to take a few minutes, as long as they were not going to be on board, to update you on what has been going on with the train stuff. And so I would like to run through quickly a series of slides that hopefully this will work. I set this up in advance. Yes, okay, good. And so I'm going to run through this with you.
If
Okay.
you want to record this, I think you have to share the screen.
That's above my pay grade.
Oh, I think if you just click on share the screen, since you already are, I think you
I think
are.
on the bottom of that, it should be.
It's right here. Just share the screen.
Right, but doesn't he have to do it from his computer?
Yeah, sure.
Showing us.
Look at this, share the screen.
Share screen. With this thing.
On the bottom of your screen.
If one of you guys knows where it is, here, come over and show me. Okay, that's not it? Okay, so let me run through this
The
thing.
records show that Mr. Seaver showed a series of slides dealing with
Yes,
feasibility, the expansion of the passenger rail service in Eastern Connecticut.
okay. And you'll not read any more slides. Okay, so this thing started 5 years ago, actually before the task force was actually set up. It was something that I got interested in when I was looking at the planning and zoning folks. This shows you a picture of the landscape for rails from New York City to Boston. The red are both the rails that it's all the rails. It includes both freight and passenger rail. And so if you look at in the state of Connecticut, the blue line is the Amtrak system, which is basically a national system where it connects one major city to the next. And that's principally what they do. The only interesting part of this is that Amtrak is only profitable in the Northeast. The rest of the country runs at something of a deficit. And the yellow and the red and the purple are what's referred to as the state system of regional rail. And the one that we're concerned with is the purple that runs along there and ends at New London. And this then transitions to why I got interested. As you all know, the Groton shopping center down here on Route 1 and McCormick Road has sort of come in something of disrepair over the last 15 years or so. The Planning and Zoning Commission wanted to see if they could do something to change that. So they changed it from from a retail to a mixed use. And when I saw that was being proposed, where you could have housing and retail operations and businesses at the same time, I started looking at the maps. And while Route 1 runs alongside that, I also noticed that the rail system runs parallel, literally within a few hundred yards of on the south side of Route 1. And so that got me to thinking about how this could be all put together into something that would serve our community in an environmentally sensitive sort of way. And so sort of my first look was to deal with what's called the Groton Center. There was where the potential would be for transit-oriented development. And then about the same time, 2 or 3 years ago, we had the big influx of all the extra work at Electric Boat, building more submarines, and then this huge hiring effort that has taken place. With this year, they're proposing to hire 5,700 plus employees to work in their 3 operations, one in New London, one in Groton, and then one in Quonset Point. And so the whole concept here was, okay, can we use existing railway already in the ground? And then when we sort of blow this up, we look at down here, where are the existing stations? And those are the ones that are in green. And then what was being proposed in this. And I simply show you, this is an interesting map problem up here. If you get to Norwich, you'll notice that looks like those 2 rails connect up there. They don't connect. And that's blown up there. Now, it's true, they did originally connect back in the beginning of the last century, but that was all taken apart, and now we have the waterfront with marinas and roadways in that area. So if we then go back to what I started to was to figure out how to extend shoreline east from New London all the way to westerly, and that was something I thought we could probably do pretty straightforward sort of way. I made trips to Connecticut DOT, a cold call basically to ask how would we go about getting this thing started. And it started out by, oh, why don't you write some letters to the governor and ask them for do something about this. The result was nothing happened with that. And so long story short, we started to talk with some of our state representatives, Anthony Nolan in London, Chris Connolly in Groton. Upshot was that Chris Connolly took this and proposed or submitted a bill to the legislature to authorize or direct, if you will, the Department of Transportation to undertake a feasibility study. Now, why would you undertake a feasibility study if you are going to have any kind of federal investment in this kind of a project? You need to have a feasibility study first. And so we have the situation where we have this pink zone here, which you see is the mixed use MTC, and then you see the rails there. The green spot in the middle is a proposed new rail station, and then the yellow circle there is within the half-mile radius of that station, which is typical of what's required for transit-oriented development as it's called. And the other part of this equation is that you notice that the rails, there is the northeast corridor running east-west here, and then you've got this little loop that goes down to the south, and then if you follow that up to the river, that same rail goes all the way up to Norwich and referred to as the old Norwich line. So there's the sort of a blow up of that, so you get a sense that there's a lot of development that's already there, and the question is how would a rail affect that? And the idea is to get people out of their cars and into public transportation. And so what this was about was trying to connect Shoreline East and the Groton Secondary with the two Norwich branch lines and up to Rhode Island. And so what we know from looking across the literature, that in order to make a commuter system work, it must be frequent, it must be reliable, and it has to operate to serve the destinations of interest. And if you miss any one of those, you basically have a system that's going to fail. And so here's the other end of that loop, the Groton Secondary, that comes up in that green spot is located on 349. On the east side of that is Pfizer. On the west side of that is the entire electric boat complex. So one could take a train there and then walk from the train to either of those two locations. And so what happened is that in 2021, an act concerning the expansion of passenger rail and ground transportation services in Eastern Connecticut was authorized and funded at a $2.3 million fund to do this. And while we originally had hoped this would be done within a year, we found some resistance to that, and DOT wanted to do this over a 2-year period. And so we are at this point, we've gone through several drafts of this study. We have ended up with a draft report now of 73 pages and appendixes of almost 800, or a little over 800 pages to satisfy the requirements that the DOT thought was necessary. I have provided comments on those various documents. I encourage you, if you need an opportunity to a sleeping pill, I've got a good substitute for that, because this is really interesting reading, and it's worth taking a look at. So the report is due from DOT to the Connecticut General Assembly at the CGA. That's due was due January 1st, and they have said they're going to have this out by the 30th of November. So,
December.
oh no, of November, but it probably won't actually get
Got it.
to Hartford until the 1st of December.
Coming by train.
It's a long way to get there. So what the feasibility study, it started out to be much simpler than this, and ended up morphing to become fairly much more complicated in a couple of good ways and a couple of not so good ways. First of all, was to extend the shoreline east to westerly Rhode Island. Second was to establish a new rail service from New London to Norwich, but there was no discussion as whether it should go up the east side or the west side. And then the third was and that was new. That was not something that was proposed originally at all, but it was put in by amendment by one of the state reps. Third was that, and it actually is in the black letter law, that they should establish new passenger station in the town of Groton and in the borough of Stonington. And that was in the original recommendations. It became very important. And then the part that became new, I mean, totally new for me, was that they said, we want to extend ground transportation services, meaning buses, basically, in the eastern region of Connecticut, eastern region. So that includes everything in eastern Connecticut, not just southeastern Connecticut, and connecting, providing interconnections between such systems and the rail line. And I welcome that because that was an opportunity for the DOT to finally look at both the first mile and the last mile problems of public transportation. So here's what the DOT settled on as being their study area, in spite of it, the way the legislation was written. And so this is what the current rail looks like. The two red stops in Groton, or on the Connecticut, on the Mystic River, and in Westerly are both existing rails stops for Amtrak, but not regular stops, but they're Amtrak stops like 4 times a day at those locations. And it does stop pretty regularly at New London and of course Old Saybrook, where it all originates. But there is no trains going up to Norwich. The last train that came down from Norwich was probably in the 50s, late 50s, and that was a Bud car that would come from all the way from Worcester all the way down to New London.
Regular service.
Regular service, that's right.
Because there've been trains on those.
Well, there are trains on those tracks, but they're basically commercial,
Yeah.
with the exception of when they have the Yale Harvard race, and then they pull out the old car or the old train and they run it. So they know how to do it.
Sure.
The east-west line here, what's called the NEC, or the Northeast corridor, is basically in this section of the state is owned by Amtrak. If you go west of New Haven, that's owned by the state of Connecticut. And so there's this interesting dynamic of who owns the rail bed and who operates on the rail
Is that
bed.
right, the rail bed west of New Haven?
Mhm.
Because it's never discussed like that. They always talk about Metro North riding on
Well,
Amtrak track.
well,
That's the track.
I don't think that's the case. Now, this is all, I mean, it's not simple because,
Oh, no.
for example, Metro North runs the Connecticut, essentially the Connecticut. It's a New York firm
Sure.
that operates in New Jersey, Long Island, and in Connecticut, but it's authorized through Connecticut state statutes. Now, interestingly enough, the cars that are run on Shoreline East are owned by the state of Connecticut, but they're run by engineers and conductors who work for Amtrak. And so you've got this interesting mix, and it gets even more complicated when you go east of here. For example, Rhode Island has no public rail system per se, but the MBTA is the local system that comes from Boston down to Whitford Junction. And so obviously the hope is eventually to get hooked up from Whitford Junction to Westerly. And so what I've done is when I go around and hawk this proposal, we talk about what Groton looks like in a profile. 40,000 folks, basically 26,000 people come to Groton every day. 95% of them are in SOVs, which is single occupancy vehicles. Electric Boat is hiring 750 new people this year. They've got apparently 5,300 on board already. And this is on top of what was hired last year, which was over 2,000. Electric Boat is building somewhere between 2 and 3 new boats per year for the next 12 years. So I think that actually has very recently been extended. And it's not just Electric Boat building new boats. And those boats are being built in various locations. Parts of them come from Virginia, parts of them come from Quonset, Rhode Island, but they're being assembled here at our facility on the shore of the Thames River. And what never gets discussed is that for every new boat, there are 2 crews of 250 or so that get put on these boats, or the whole operation. So you get, not only you get new boats, but you get more Navy folks coming in. Now, they don't always stay here, but they're actually, the crew is actually a part of the building process. So as they build the boat, the crew learns how it went together and what happens when you get down in the water and you got to take care of the problem yourself. The crew is able to do that in good measure. And the final point here is that what this does in terms of Groton's needs, which we've heard over and over again, it supports development, it supports housing, and it potentially supports transportation. And I would argue that you heard all the stuff about the need for housing. That's true, particularly low-income housing. But if you don't put that together with jobs and with transportation, you're basically headed for a mess. And so, so the vision, my vision, and this is not what's in the state statute, is to get Shoreline East to at least to Rhode Island, and hopefully on up to Providence and Boston in sometime in the future. Just last night, I gave a talk or presentation over at the Westerly Town Hall and getting their grassroots stirred up about having a resolution going to Providence to get this kind of effort going underway on their end of the rail line here. And much to my surprise, 60 people showed up. 2 state senators, 2 town managers, and a crew of people who are on the council and on the boards and commissions from Westerly. And I think they're off to a really nice start. So then when you look at what's going to happen along the Thames River, it's not clear. Basically, DOT at this point has said that they don't really want to do anything on the east side in terms of rail, and they cite the problem with crossing the bridge in the Thames River. They say it's just too crowded and you can't do that. And I've written back and said, that's a matter of a regulatory decision. That's not your decision. Why don't you let the regulatory system operate? Because these kinds of permits are modified all the time. So that remains to be seen about what going all the way up to Norwich is. But one of the things that comes, and I'll show you this in a minute here, that if we use the bottom part of the Norwich branch line, that is from the subbase down to the northeast corridor around the Groton Secondary, you go by the airport and you potentially could have a stop there in the future. You could drop students off for Avery Point and then have people be able to come and go from Electric Boat to Pfizer. Never mind the regular general population that lives over there, which is actually fairly dense. And so this becomes interesting because you've got all these different ownerships of the rail. You've got Amtrak, you got Connecticut, and then you got the what's referred to as the old Providence and Worcester Railroad, now the Genesee in Wyoming. And so we hope the report at this point has a proposal to build 2 stations, one in Groton and one in Stonington. And we nailed the location in Groton and in Stonington. I think that's good. The more problematic is the Mystic Station. They don't like putting a high level platform on a curve for obvious reasons because of the train's bank, and getting handicapped people off ADA dependent becomes a bit more difficult. And so they wanted to move the station to the east of the current station on the east side of the Masons Island Road. And I've written back and said, there is a straight section off the bridge between the bridge and the current station. How about putting a high platform there? And so we haven't heard what's going to happen with that. And of course, I like to see an electric boat station and a sub-base station. And those are something that they haven't even been willing to even talk about. And so part of what I wanted to do is see if we can connect the rail and the transit in the future, the first mile, last mile problem. And if you're walking, it's a half mile that's normally considered to be appropriate or the limit of what people will do, unless you're a New Yorker, and then it may be longer. And then if you're a biker, you go 5 miles. And that's typically what people are willing to do if they're commuting using either using bikes or their foot traffic. So here's the loop that I'm particularly interested in seeing going forward, and I think I'm going to have a struggle with, is I'd like to see first of all the shoreline extended all the way to Rhode Island with a stop at least in the Groton Center, one in Mystic, one in Stonington, and then into Westerly. And by the way, the Westerly station has the same problems that the Groton station has. I'm sorry, Mystic has. But the folks over in Westerly have figured out there is a straight section that they could extend the station to, and it could be, there's a couple of alternatives there that would work really nicely. And so that's what the configuration looks like there. And you'll notice I filled in the MVC where the mixed use is. We've got an industrial zone there to the south with the airport, and then we got a fairly dense amount of housing in that whole area. And so what this does for the town or the state, it rebuilds and expands existing infrastructure, and we're talking in the $1 billion range. It stimulates creates jobs, stimulates economic development, supports TOD, which seems to be the big fad these days, and I think importantly and appropriately so, particularly as it relates to sustainable development, first and last mile problems, and begins to deal with a parking issue, for example, which is already a very much acute problem in the city of Groton. And what this does is reduce the need for more public highways. It doesn't eliminate it, it just reduces that need. And it increases worker and commuter safety in a big sort of way. And so what brings us back to the task force, this is really what I consider to be sustainable development in a way that I think we support the industry and connecting up the various different groups of people that need to be connected, the Navy, electric boat advisory businesses, the colleges, the general public, and the tourism of the region. And there is really light interest given to the tourist issue in the report currently. And so what this does is also better connects Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and in fact, New York City. And it doesn't replace Amtrak, it supplements what Amtrak does. Amtrak is basically authorized to really basically run fast and between cities. And I say fast, we're talking 90 to 150 miles an hour, most of which you cannot do here in Connecticut now. And there is now $2 billion on the books right now as of Tuesday of this week to speed up this process. And we're going to go from 70 miles an hour to 90 miles an hour. And that is probably very important. I think very important in a regional context, but it doesn't deal with the issues that we have right here in town. And we've got this issue of how do we move people efficiently here. If any of you have been on I-95 recently, you know what the problem is. So what this also does is reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector, which in Connecticut represents 40% of where they come from in Connecticut. If we reduce that a little bit, it makes a big difference. And what this does is provide an alternative for the traveling public and cars and trucks, depending about how they're loaded. The trains, depending about how they're loaded, sometimes for it reduces 3 to 10 times less greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that's very important. It obviously reduces vehicles miles traveled, the whole issue of single occupancy vehicles, or reduces traffic accidents and congestion. It clearly improves air quality and basically makes the place more resilient and more sustainable, making it a better place to live and work. And so that's back to what the scheme is here. So the big picture is sort of doing all this at once. Obviously, Groton plays a very small role in the big picture, but I think there's no reason why we can't play in this game. We have the jobs, and we have the rails in the ground. And so that's basically what I've been telling people. And if you really are glutton for punishment and you want to look at the website for the state DOT report, there it is. And so with that, that's sort of the update of what I've got here to show you. I gotta remember how to turn this thing off temporarily. Put it to sleep. Okay. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, but that's I hadn't done this with you for probably well over a year. I don't think I've ever, maybe it's more than. So that's what we're doing, what I've been doing to make this thing work.
Several of us went, Frank, myself, and
Jesse did, and you did too. You attended some of the public meetings.
So
Yeah.
the public meeting, and Dr. Boland very vociferously and accurately pointed out that the timeline that they're talking about of 20 years to go from feasibility study to implementation seemed really out of whack with the need, which is today. So are you getting any feedback about, compressing that?
We haven't yet. That is the, if you will, the DOT culture from both Washington and the state. It is a very elaborate, let's study it approach. You'll see throughout the study, the 70 pages, they keep talking about, we'll have to study this further, and we need more money to do it, by the way. This study was done, is being done by not just one contractor, but by 5 contractors. And so you can see where the problems are.
Right, for $2 million.
For $2.3 million.
And probably 75% of it, you just covered on the table.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not only that,
But we don't have any of their responses to all of our comments until final report. comes.
that's right.
No, that's right.
That's right.
The,
I got a very nice letter. I sent a 10-page.
Say we got your comments.
Got your
Stay
comments.
tuned.
So at some point I'll get a chance to this, but I think
the study I thought was very good. I think the presentations were very good. And pretty much, laid out what your view is here. I think most of those elements were there. It seemed to me that there are parts of the feasibility study that are low-hanging fruit that could be put together tomorrow.
Right.
Why not just keep that
Give 'em
damn
some
shoreline
examples.
keep going to Westerly, and
I didn't, there absolutely there is. The 2 of them are, when you ask the guys engineers who operate these trains, they come to London, what they do is they call it turn and burn. They wait until the train goes back the other way. And one of them said to me at one point, "Oh, no problem. We could run to Westerly, turn, burn there, and come right back." And so it is possible, because it's only something like 26 minutes with the stops to get to Westerly and come back. So it's all possible to do that. And I would
Does this money, the new money, what I thought of, because what we heard, two items of low hanging fruit. One was the extension of the line. Just carry, that's the service, no line, the service.
Service.
The rest of it.
Yeah.
And the other was the municipal bus. That we could get the
Ex-
bus stop.
exactly.
Going better
Now,
than it's going right now.
I didn't,
But, as far as the line goes, there was a conflict. There was a conflict, apparent conflict with with Amtrak service. That there are trains coming and going, and Amtrak's going to increase the number of trains coming and going, and that affected when Shoreline could go or come. I don't know where that stands, whether we could work around that, and to what extent, because of course, this is all realize that today, speaking about all of this, is at a time when Shoreline service is being reduced by the state of Connecticut. And it's being reduced by the state of Connecticut because of money. To what extent does the Biden bill provide money for service, or is that all infrastructure?
well, the answer is I don't know for sure. Part of the federal money is for obviously for infrastructure,
Big
but
time.
there's also a big chunk in there for, there's like a $4 million chunk in there that, at least it's visible, that says that Amtrak should look at travel between New Haven and Providence. And so there's going to be an opportunity to do more of that. What I understand with this is that the way you get around some of the problems of having two systems at different speeds is that you have, when you come into a station, you have a third set of rail, and you
Sidetrack.
hop off on that, and then people can go flying past you. And there's also a fair amount of crossing over on the rails on the two systems there is now. And it looks like the capacity issue at this point is not the problem.
No,
They've got the capacity to do it. It's whether they got the will to do it and the money. And I would argue that when you do the economic analysis, a different way from they do it, they talk about what it costs to put a passenger on a train on Shoreline East and what it costs the state for each passenger. And I'm saying, compared to what? Compared to what it costs to own a car and run a car in the same distance? I mean, one of the economic issues that we're gonna have to get into, I'm gonna have to get into, is looking at what the real cost of an automobile is to Joe Q public, as opposed to what the real cost is for you riding the rail. And when you add up the highway construction project, the maintenance on that project, or those projects, the motor vehicle department, the transportation department, the state police, and then you put in emergency management people at the local level, and you add all that number up. And then what we know is that cars cost a huge amount of money and to operate. When you add that up and compare that to what it takes to train, the chain looks pretty cheap. But that analysis is not being looked at. DOT is tending to treat this as, on this side of the equation is highways, and we don't talk about that over here. And over here is trains, and we don't talk about that over here. So there's not the integration that this study had requested, basically, to look at how this compares to the alternative.
political support.
Local political support is very good. State support is unsure at this point. The state seems to be mostly focusing on how fast we can get to New York, which means increasing speed on the trunk line, and not what Amtrak runs on, not on the regional effort. But as has been pointed out by many people at the meetings that you were all at, people like you guys want to get to Green Airport, you want to get to New York City, and you don't want to drive an I-95, or you may want to get to New Haven or some of the intermediate. And so the regional system provides that kind of service. And if you really want to go to Boston, or you really want to go to DC, you don't take the regional systems, you take the Amtrak. And it is cost effective if you're able to plan this 30 days in advance.
Mhm.
It is less than cost effective if you decide to do it tomorrow. I mean, you can go to I think to Boston for like $17 if you do it a month in advance. It's like $250 or more if you go. I mean, it's a big difference. The Amtrak tends to treat this like airlines treat their fare structure. And while the airlines can get away with it because you already have a competitive system, this has no competitive system. I mean, there's only only one group that runs national rail, and that's Amtrak. I mean, that's it. There's not anybody competing with that. Other questions?
Stay tuned, huh?
Yeah, stay tuned. So it's gonna be an interesting December for me. And then what I suspect is gonna happen is that we'll see what the state legislature does with us. I would suspect what's gonna happen is they're going to have a series of public hearings at the state legislature. And then this will be an opportunity
On the
to,
feasibility study.
on the results of the feasibility study. And that's gonna be interesting because
Is DOT anywhere near requesting that, if I understand correctly, a feasibility study is required for all federal funded projects?
effectively, yes.
And so they did the feasibility study.
Yep,
Now you've got to do another study. The next phase, design and implementation study, which is another 2-year, 3-year, $2 million, $3 million kind of effort that has to be appropriated. Is DOT anywhere near moving into that stage?
I can't tell. I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know. I mean, what I can tell you is that with the pressure on to deal with climate change, my guess is the pressure is going to be to up these schedules. I mean, they can be updated. I mean, they can be accelerated. When they put in Shoreline East originally, it happened in a matter of a couple of years. It was bang, bang, done. And if you can do it that way, then why shouldn't we do it that way?
yeah,
And we're not trying to create Grand Central Station here in Groton. We're not trying to create, the Penn Station, now Monahan Station, and we're trying to get people from point A to point B in a safe, reliable sort of way.
right.
And so that's a difference.
I wonder if we ought to call them something different than stations. So you see, what I have in mind is really a disembarkation point. We're not going to have anything like the Mystic Railroad Station, that
No,
house
no.
of the railroad station.
No.
You're going to have a concrete platform with some
State
steps
street.
up to it and a rail that runs along it, and you get off onto that, maybe with a little
Right,
few umbrellas for rain cover,
right.
kind of
I
step.
mean, if you go
Exactly.
to the branch line in New Canaan,
No,
okay?
Yeah.
And you leave New Canaan and you go to the next stop, Talmadge Hill,
right,
what have you got? You've
right.
got a concrete platform, period.
Yeah, they don't
That's
even
the
have
right height.
umbrellas.
I mean, it is possible to not put in the Rolls Royce. Now, getting them to deal with that is another matter. Why do we need to have a 500-foot platform when you have only a couple of cars full of people? It doesn't make any sense. So there are some issues around, and then the question is why you got these issues this way? Why is it set up this way? And I think there's a lot of room for discussion there with them. Oh.
Does the feasibility study have to be completed before they can even try the range?
The answer is I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that.
That's the hope, right? And we're talking, sounds like 4 years.
Well, we have to get authorization from the General Assembly to do it. And then they have to direct the Transportation Department to get in gear. And
Do we have to get approval from Amtrak?
oh yeah, everything will need to be negotiated. Everything needs,
Their needs would supersede any of this.
it's all negotiable. I mean, you set it up so that political pressure is brought to bear to make this happen. I mean, the reason we've got to stop in Amtrak in Mystic is because the Congress directed them to stop there. They wouldn't stop there unless it had been directed. So this is going to get really quite interesting, but it's also about sustainable development, and that's why it's of interest to us, because it sets a new pattern. Okay, Jesse, do you have anything you want to talk about in terms of the at this point about the energy efficiency and conservation for Groton?
I had obviously hoped that Megan and John or John would be here because I think this is mostly
Well, do you want to hold this off until next meeting?
till next week.
Next meeting.
Next meeting. I think maybe you might, I don't know whether they've done this or not, but the federal money is huge. It's actually going to be better next year. This year, tax credits for items undertaken this year are usually at 10% of the cost of such. There are a few things where there is a specific amount, but next year it's 30% of the cost. For things like heat pumps, it's $5,000 per heat, and then there are rebates in addition. So there is a lot of money available, and some specifically that really help some of our less affluent residences. Insulation is the cheapest energy efficiency thing you can do, and there's up to $15,000 available per household for insulation purposes.
And that would come from who? I want to do it in this.
This comes from the federal government.
Oh, I know that, but I don't go to the federal government.
No, you get, there are, on the DOE website, there are a list of approved contractors, same on the Energize CT website. You get a form from the federal government, $5,295, if you're interested, and fill out that form, and it goes in with your tax return. And Energize CT is trying to work in tandem with the federal rebates and the money that's available there.
Can't you go to Groton Utilities, for example, and they'll come in and do a free energy audit?
Well, Groton Utilities is a little different.
Right, it's a little different.
Groton Utilities has upped its game some. They
So
do,
that's separate, that's not related
so-
to this.
no, but both you, Eversource, Groton Utilities that serve us. Eversource is connected to Energize CT, so those rebates are additional. I think Groton Utility must have applied for some money because their incentives for heat pumps and insulation have risen dramatically from where they were a year ago. So it's information that if we can get Megan and to get this out to people is really valuable.
And as I understand it, depending upon your income level, some was actually maybe free. And so
The audits are free for low income.
but also
yes.
some of the work on insulation is free, some of that stuff, as I understand it. So you may not have to pay to have some of the stuff done.
Right, and there are what are called heat loans that are like less than 1% and no money up front and things like that. So
I
there's,
didn't understand where Megan and John came in.
well, I think Megan is in the position to be working with, I mean, we sort of started down that process of trying to get information out to town residents about this, and we
Getting the word out.
Getting the
kind of hit a
Thank you.
stone wall.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we still have to work on that.
Exactly. Okay,
And there are federal grants that I would just love to know whether they've been applied for.
right,
But
Yeah.
right. We'll find out.
well, the
Okay.
deadline for one is next week.
Anything further on this at this point? Okay, I put down schedule and dates for meetings for 2024. Do you want to continue to do the same thing we've done this last year? I'm gonna get asked very soon to submit when we want to do this, and as it is now, I think it's the third Wednesday of each month.
What?
Third
This is-
Thursday of each month.
This is the.
I think it's
this is
I
the
think it's the
first,
second.
the second
Oh,
Thursday.
What is it? What is it?
Today is the 9th of,
Yeah, it's the second. I'm sorry. It's the second Thursday of each month
Right, yeah,
at 4 o'clock. Does that
Yeah.
work for everybody
That would be-
that's,
okay.
at this
until it
point?
doesn't.
Hmm?
It's as good as any, I think, right?
And it seems often to me for what we're doing, but, you know, once, our last meeting, I know maybe I missed me, but our last
No.
meeting was a while ago. but
No, it was June.
Was it June?
Yeah,
So, and have we, you know, and we were having some discussion around what, exactly what we're doing and we don't want to be getting in the way and Megan's way. and-
Still there.
still there.
So,
That's an ongoing conversation.
right, but maybe we should, one of these meetings, next one should be with Megan and just discuss that very thing before we have a whole.
I think, meetings are deciding to have meetings are our business. I think is how you'd frame that.
Okay.
We decide when we're gonna meet. That's,
And then we can,
and then we can let them know what we're doing.
Okay.
That's the proper way of doing that. And it has more to do with the state requirements for the FOIA stuff. So if that,
Built in a summer recess, we didn't.
we have taken summer recesses, partly because we can't get a quorum together, and that's what happens, or for one reason or another, there doesn't seem to be business that should be carried on at that point. So we've actually gone for a longer period than we have in the past. And
And that was somewhat due to the uncertainty you've just referred
Yeah.
to, Maggie.
yeah,
And now that the election's over, we have a new town council, et cetera. It's time to readdress those issues.
yeah, there's plenty to.
yes, exactly.
And the other thing that happens is that meetings come up and get canceled, and there isn't good public notice of that. I've tried to attend this meeting a couple of times this summer, and
Oh, really?
and
Okay.
Well-
it's listed as happening. I
Well,
know a lot of, and town has general problem.
Yeah.
Because
so here's how the process works, and it's not very effective.
Even though it's very formal.
Yeah.
I mean,
not effective.
Exactly. We, in the beginning of the year, and that's why I've asked this question, is we give the town clerk our meeting requirements for our quote regular meetings. And that's recorded, and that's somewhere buried in the website. There is no regular publication of that other than going to the website.
Yeah.
And it used to be in the paper, and now it's no longer in the paper, so it's really hard to do. The only requirement is that you have to have your agenda in within 24 hours of the meeting. And oftentimes that is, I mean, we always do that, get it in. Mostly I get it in 3 or 4 days in advance, but when there's uncertainty, then I don't. And this time there was some uncertainty, and so I didn't. We have the ability to what are called special meetings, which I then give notice to the town clerk. She publishes it, and he hangs it on the door down there in the outside the clerk's office, and that's the only way you know about it.
Not on the website.
It goes.
Everything goes to the website.
Yeah, everything goes to the website. But
But
again,
Not the cancellations.
not the cancellation. Well, sometimes it is on a cancellation,
Well,
but it's not updated
well, then
regularly.
you should, I think this warrants a note back to the town clerk.
Just say,
that-
I'll be
that
happy to
there's
work with
Something
her.
very wrong here, and it's not us. We cancel the meeting and,
Yeah.
and the public doesn't know about it.
right, Betsy knows and tells
the
us
hell?
it's been canceled. or
For all the
so.
baloney they want to go through. Sorry, that's an acceptable word, right?
Speaking of which, Paul, could you give us your email address, so when I send this stuff out, I don't need to broadcast it to the world.
Okay. You want me to say it now?
No,
Well,
It's really hard. It's all.fox6@gmail.com.
I think I can do that. Thank you.
so moving on, old business. A number of us attended the town's extreme heat study last summer. And that's all I'm gonna say about it at this point in time. I would hope that we get Megan here to talk more about that. And then
Looking for results from that?
pardon? Well,
The
that's,
study, sorry.
Yeah.
Not the,
yeah, study. Yeah, what are the results of the study?
was that what she presented at the town, at the public meeting?
Yeah,
But that
is there any follow-up?
Plus the one that she hired an intern.
Yes.
Or
That's correct. That's correct. Claire was
Doesn't
hired.
seem to me that there'd be much to present to us. Beyond that.
I just want to know if there's anything happened. That's all. I mean, we do it.
Oh,
What goes from there? Okay, so the next thing is, on that list is, the, update on the Mystic Flood study. And Frank, it's been pretty quiet over the summer, I guess. And is there a meeting coming up on this, which you could tell us about?
the, downtown Mystic Study is being conducted by, town employees. Megan, John Reiner, Deb Jones, with the assistance of GZA Consultants. They're a consulting group. And it started a couple of years ago, more or less. Didn't everything. And it proceeded through a couple of public workshops, maybe 3, depending on how you're counting them. And they were held 21, 22 sort of thing, period. And then things got very quiet. And time went by. And within the last month or so, we got a notification of some of the reasons why. The principal investigator for GZA changed jobs. So that caused the project to slow down a little bit. About a month ago now, there was a meeting of the steering committee. There is a steering committee and I'm on it. And Jim O'Donnell is on it and Chad Frost is on it. Mark Berry and different members of the town. The Public Works chair is on it. And we went through there a presentation by GZA of the initial draft. And they got a lot of comments. It was a good exchange back and forth. And you know how time goes by these days. It's hard keeping track of what was Tuesday and what was last Tuesday. Let's say the beginning of this week, I received the first draft of the draft. The review, 70 some odd pages plus figures. And we've been going through that. There is going to be another workshop next Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the morning, a Zoom session with the downtown commercial interests to go over some of the initial findings in the report. And shortly after that, we expect to have another meeting of the steering committee. All of this in anticipation of completion of all of this in something like February 24. I won't comment on the draft because it's still their review comments.
Okay. So I will probably sit in on that meeting. Is it all Zoom?
Or I know,
No in person?
you mean with the commercial interest?
Yeah,
No, nothing in person that I know
okay. Well, I will try to sit in
of.
on that.
We'll get more information
Yeah,
on that.
that'd be great.
You could send out a link to that. for all.
Yeah, well,
Actually, I could send you that. Why don't I send you that link and we can, or try to send it to everybody.
okay, fine. That'd be
Because
great.
I think there's a registration for that. And
Okay.
as part of the registration, you get the Zoom link.
Okay. And I would just
So-
encourage you all to,
Yeah.
you got the time to do it.
So
Not planning to
Giselle,
do a public meeting?
Yeah, they will.
Okay,
Probably will.
that's after February, is that?
No, before February. I think there's one more plan where they present the results.
so when you talk about results, I know that the last public hearing that they had, and I went to, I thought was pretty good. and included a lot of historical background about how we got to the point where we are now in terms of how Mystic developed and where the shoreline used to be and this and that and frequency of flooding kind of historically. I thought it was some good stuff. But I thought that, and that was sort of, I think, the easy part of the study. The hard part of the study is to come up with recommendations that where do we go in the future about things like zoning and construction requirements and raising roads and all that messy stuff. Is this report going to have that kind of thing in it? The study?
It's 71 pages. I'm on 61. So I take the 5th for the moment.
Just a comment on that. I think it was the Post, not the Times. There was a very interesting article about Hoboken, New Jersey, and what they have done as they live on the Hudson River and deal with that constantly. And it was really pretty incredible.
Very
And
impressive.
did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the day that.
But they got money post Sandy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
It
would
goes back
just
a
go to
ways.
the Post and go Hoboken, New Jersey flooding.
Well, I also sent out 2 articles to everybody.
Yes, I
One
got
from
those,
the
yeah.
New York Times about this neighborhood off of Jamaica Bay that's flooding all the time. And then also another article about how people are looking at seawalls as a way to deal with that.
Okay, if you could send those,
I
well,
did.
you send them around.
They don't, sending around New York Times articles doesn't mean anything.
No, it's hard to get in.
You
there.
can't use them.
But I
Pardon?
can copy
can't use
Post
them.
articles and get them around.
Okay.
No, I sent,
And yours came through. Well, I'm a subscriber, so it doesn't matter.
If you're not a subscriber to
Right.
the New York Times, you can't read it.
Right.
Can't
Yeah.
read them.
Can't read the articles, but I could read the New Yorker. Piece, that was good.
well, New Yorker I sent as a PDF.
Yeah, that was.
I could send the other one as a PDF too. I thought that,
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
I know this because my wife is a subscriber.
okay.
And she can send me sort of me and I can get it.
Mhm.
But you send it to me, even though you think you're doing the same thing, it
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Okay, well, I did, it's good to know.
For some reason, it doesn't work.
Mhm.
They have firewalls, paywalls.
Paywall, it's called.
Yeah, early on in that process, when they had their first couple of meetings, I'd asked the question whether there was any enforcement or any binding agreement on the part of the town to follow up on recommendations of these committees.
No,
And the answer is no.
No.
That we end up spending an enormous amount of time and money studying things. And there's not even a hint of an agreement that we might act on any of these. I don't know what the solution to that is, but it's frustrating to me to have continually study, and, 10 years later, we're still introducing the study to whatever the problem.
but you're in very good company. Because
Yeah.
the one thing that impressed us in the review that we did,
Yeah,
just to bring in 25 words up to date. We went through over 10 years of studies done for the town on a variety of subjects. And virtually all of the recommendations that are needed for just about anything are there.
yeah,
So we started, our emphasis from sort of like day 2, if not day 1,
yeah.
was action.
Mhm.
We don't need another plan. And I don't think that I certainly have not changed my opinion. So I look at this in the same way, like that you're asking the questions. I'm now looking for where the roads, most of the obvious, we didn't need to pay $90,000, $100,000 to have written down. We need to raise a road. Okay, let's go to get about raising the roads. Well, there's this, fine, work on, just like the train says, work on it. Because the roads flood now, they're sure as hell gonna flood next year even more.
Okay, we'll get back to this, I think, going
We never
forward.
leave it.
We
Now
won't be
you have an
leaving.
official voice that you can use to ask those questions.
Yeah, I was, I didn't do it in the introduction, but I was just elected to the RPM on Tuesday. So I've got somewhat of a connection in there, whatever that was.
Lots of meetings.
Right.
God bless you.
What were you thinking?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you, what's the date? The 14th, you said, Frank?
Next Wednesday, I believe.
December?
That's
Our Christmas.
15th, I think. At 8 o'clock.
Oh, you want me to look it up? I can.
Next
Well-
Wednesday is the 15th.
Okay, I want to basically take a minute or two to, because we haven't had this conversation. You recall, we all had a meeting with the town council. And we thought that coming out of that, as I recall, we thought that had actually been a pretty good meeting. We got pretty good feedback. A couple of people didn't really say much about their feelings about it. But literally within 48 hours after that meeting, I was notified that a resolution had been proposed to put it on the agenda, resolution to dissolve the task force. And that was seconded, and that remains on that list. And
It's 11:15.
Yeah, not 8 o'clock in the morning. But I don't,
Sorry.
sorry, I don't,
11:15 is the meeting.
but I don't see a registration link.
No, it's on the other one.
It's 11:15, but what time is it?
8
o'clock. On Zoom.
And I'll send you the links for the registration.
Okay. So,
Sorry, Zil.
I did have a conversation with the town manager about this. And he said he didn't think that was gonna come up anytime soon. But that's how we left it. I have now had several conversations with the town manager, and I will continue to do that to see if we can figure out what the new council might be considering or not considering about this. And this goes to, in part, the issue of what our role would be or should be going forward. And I think the general conversation we've had is that we should be an advisory and not, and that should be very clear. And I think that was generally the tenor, and I think that is an ongoing conversation that I'm gonna have with the town manager and probably with members, maybe the new mayor, depending on how that all works out. And we'll have further discussions about that going forward. The last thing I wanted to tell you is that I was invited on rather short notice to go meet with the Groton Conservation Commission to talk about sustainability and resilience, because they're leaning into wanting to be involved with the revision to the plan of conservation and development. I said, do you want me to talk from the task force's point of view, or do you want me to talk as Joe Q. Public Stever? And they said, well, just come talk to us about Joe Q. Stever, because we know you haven't had time to really talk about this thing in the task force. I said, fine. So I spent about half hour with them going over what the principles were, and I think it was a pretty lively conversation. I think they understand a little bit better about what this means, and we had some exchange about what it might mean. For example, Conservation Commission might be very much involved with preserving trees, for example, in the community as part of the plan of conservation and development and so forth. So that was a good start. We'll see what happens. I would like to have, and that's part of why I've asked John Reiner to come talk to us about what the process is for the POCD. And that's all I have to report on that.
Who's the author of that?
It'll be the planning office.
The Conservation and Development.
Plan of conservation and development.
Seems to me that
It'll have to be approved by the
it seemed to me that
council.
in the past, I have to look at the ones I have, but that conservation was very much involved in it.
It
as in
is,
Being the office.
but like all boards and commissions, they get support. and the support comes from the planning office.
Sure, fine.
So that's how it works. So we'll see how that all goes together.
Do you
But
know whether there are yet any scheduled public input things for
no.
the scope of the,
not as far as I could tell from that
'Cause that's
conversation.
a pretty important part of that process?
Absolutely. And so that's why I wanted to have to talk to John Reiner about this. So I've got a bunch of things I have to carry out on your behalf. Next meeting is December 14th.
I have an item
Yes,
for old business,
go ahead.
which is that I did speak with Dave Aldridge at the SCURA, Southeastern Connecticut Regional Resource Recovery Agency, to get an update on their plans to institute processing of organic matter, food waste, and other organic matter. And they have a pilot project right now in Stonington that I reported to you, I think, on the last meeting. But the status of that was that they now are talking about doing a full-scale processing plant in Preston, contiguous to the trash to energy facility that's there in Preston. And in order for that to happen, they had to go to the Preston planning folks, planning and zoning folks. They had an initial positive reception from them. And now it's going to go to open town meeting. And I believe it's going to happen very soon. I was hoping he'd give me a call and let me know. He said sometime in November, and we're getting halfway through November now. I'll call him again. He told me, however, he's very optimistic this is going to happen, and that he has the funding in place, internal funding, as it turns out, because he's actually operating in the black in this on his operation. So he's got funding that he's putting this aside to start the engineering drawings for this. And the engineering drawings are based on an operating facility in Syracuse, New York, which is very successful. It's an aerobic system, so it does not generate methane gas and does not require a lot of digesters and physical energy or
Energy
produce
or
greenhouse
vessels.
gases.
Right.
It's actually a very simple system where they just lay the stuff out in a trough, and it has pipes at the base of this trough with holes in it. They pump air into this thing, and they add add wood chips or something for getting the right texture of the thing. And apparently it generates heat up into about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. That digests everything. So you can actually put meat scraps and bones and stuff into it, not just vegetable scraps. Anyway, he's optimistic enough to hope that this thing's going to fly with the Preston folks, that he's investing funds into the engineering part of this. And if that happens, then it's going to be a matter of getting permits from the DEP, and so on. But I'm hoping that this is going to be a go. And if it is, I personally would like to be involved, and I'd like the task force to be involved in selling the idea to the town to provide the pickup and the transportation necessary to get the stuff to this facility, because that's going to be probably a tougher nut to crack, particularly for the town of Groton, where we have such different pickup. The fire districts do some of it, and some of it's done by the city, and some of it's done just by the local homeowner. So that's always been a mess as far as trying to coordinate pickup, but to separate transport the stuff. There's going to be can be quite a bit of savings involved, because it turns out that organic matter takes up to about 40% of the weight of the stuff that we put in our garbage cans. And so we'd be transporting less of it. to, anyway,
That's great.
there's good benefits to it.
Nick, when you talk to them, can you find out about, I mean, so this is a regional system they're talking about.
Right.
And so there's obviously some presumption that they will get communities to provide the raw material that is organic garbage.
Right.
Um,
Is made
it-
up of 14.
Yeah, but can you find out any more about the economics of that? Have they done enough work to understand that what the tipping fees, as they're called, might be on that?
Yeah, actually, the tipping fees are a big part of his figuring into all this, because the tipping fees are going to be going up big time in the next couple of years. Because they have to renegotiate a lot of this with the, right now, can't remember the exact figure, but I think it's over half of the trash in Connecticut gets transported to
Ohio.
and Pennsylvania and Ohio. And you can imagine how much greenhouse gases those trucks are, burning up. And so it's a statewide problem.
Okay. I mean, if you get the information, because that's what we're gonna need to do to sell this kind of.
Right.
Okay,
So maybe if you could put me on the agenda, or put this subject on the agenda
I will.
in the future, so.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
Okay.
Glad you're following it.
Organic waste, Mickey. I'm sorry. Okay, we can deal with that. Anything else, anybody has? I have a couple of things I just wanted to tell you about. One, there is a November 16th climate conversation, future of fossil fuels. It's a National Academy of Science thing, which if anybody, it's a I think a remote Zoom thing that might be very interesting. There is a CCM webinar on local and regional climate action plans on November 14th on Tuesday, which you can be involved with if you wish. There is also it's okay, and then the other one is that there are two. I've got to put it out the last two circa, and there are a bunch of
And particularly the 1st of December one,
yes.
which you do have to register for.
So if you
You look at that,
it's a
Serpent
pardon?
does if you get on their mailing list, they send out a monthly update, which actually has a lot of information in it, so.
Yeah. Well, the one on
One is, it sounded like it was a lawyer oriented.
Well, they do that too.
Is that the law school?
yes, law school.
Is that the one on the 1st? I thought that was the Resilient Communities.
Well, join the Connecticut Institute for a one-day conference at UConn Law School. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
December
Is
1st?
that-
Here.
Is that this month?
Is that the one you're?
Yeah, it is. The law school is doing some really good stuff on sort of what you can do and can't do, but you don't need to go to Hartford to go to it. You can get on it on Zoom.
Yeah, but I'd encourage anybody who
Yeah.
can do that, do that. Anything else that people want to talk about?
So where are we? You're talking with Bird. And we have a new town council. That's in quotes, because it isn't a new town council. It's the same old town council.
It's not.
It's a new
about
town
half
council.
new. It's about half.
I mean,
Two of them anyway.
we got,
Two of them on?
no, we've got
it's
more than
like
that.
4 or 5. I mean, of the 9, 4 of them are new.
Because they were recently appointed and then elected. So we
Okay.
really do have 4 new councils.
Right.
And there are a couple of important issues. One is leadership in the council, and then how they organize. And I think that's going to take place over the next month. And that's going to, we need to have a conversation about that probably next month.
Have a conversation about,
Our interaction with them.
And I would guess that we would like to have John schedule a presentation of the task force to the new town council.
That's exactly right.
wouldn't you think?
We would think,
Yes.
since the one in June got canceled.
Well, one of the operational things that I'm thinking about right now is that I, in my simple-minded way, will continue to function as I believe I was asked to function by the town council, and that is as an advisor
That's correct.
of issues that are related to climate change, sustainability. But in the next month or so, along comes the downtown Mystic study. It would seem to me when it is in its final stage, it would be appropriate for us to review that and to provide our thoughts to the town council.
Absolutely.
Yes, I would think that would be an important thing.
So
to do.
expect that on your calendar in the next few
Okay,
months.
okay,
Sounds great.
sort
good.
of thing.
I think that's good. Anything else that,
And of course, then we're gonna beat the drum again for education.
well, I think that's,
We have plans, I have plans on my pad for additional forums. And dealing with subjects like coastal erosion.
right,
And we had looked at times when they should be presented. There may be other subjects that would more appropriate to present around the new year because Groton Long Point will be occupied, sort of a thing. But we should, I would hope, plan some additional efforts in that area. It may be in the form of signs that are posted around town associated with the tide staffs. And some of those signs might be prepared by students at the Marine Magnet School. Sort of thing.
there's a lot of
Collaboration
possibilities.
with us. Bring some students into it,
I think
subjects to be discussed.
Yep.
subject to be discussed. I think if we can make that, think about it as being as an advisor to the town council, what to happen, I think that'll work fine. At this point, and that may change.
Well, now you're gonna skirt that a little bit. I'm thinking we'll do it. We might have to get some money from the town council for the plaques and moving into the signs,
Yeah.
sort of thing. Then we involve the town council, but as far as the doing of it, there's nobody at the town council that's gonna do this.
Right.
Well,
And we were specifically charged to do public education.
right,
So-
so I don't have any problem with the public education part of this. Now, I think we need to talk about
Yeah.
how we then implement that, and that's the question that I have. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
okay, anything else?
Well, Megan, does she think of herself as providing staff to us?
No,
Definitely not.
definitely not.
I hope not. She's been told that that's not the case.
Well, can we get somebody to untell her that? I mean,
What do you mean? Until her what?
that we, we could use some staff.
No,
She will
Mickey,
not be
that's
that.
not gonna happen. At this point. I mean, everything is obviously gonna, maybe changes with a new council, but at this point. It is what it is.
We were specifically
Told we didn't.
told that when we were set up. I don't know that it wasn't even said expressly.
It was.
Specifically at the town council meeting, where we all were sort of sworn in and
Yeah,
welcome.
They
That
said
we
no
were not
staff.
to involve any staff. of the
That's
town.
right. But that's part of the,
No, it was clearly
That's
part of
clear.
our
That's clear. And so I think that remains the
I
be
think
the
it's sitting
case.
down, probably somewhere.
Okay, well,
Would you like to move to adjourn?
we can,
Move to adjourn?
yes, take a second on that, okay? Let me, end the meeting.
So you can move that cursor. If you
Yeah.
could move that cursor, you could bring it over here.
What's that?
But his,
Click on it.
It's too late.
You click on it, it should bring up your screen.
Right. that way,
And you could then be seeing your
Well,
slides.
okay, let me just do a test on that as long as before we,
I am going to run because I have dinner guests already in my house.
okay,
Eat all the dinner.
thank you.
No, it still has to be cooked.
Okay, so if I get this going,
Oh, see up here? Select the window of the application. What is this? Is that on your screen?
No,
no,
that's just up here. So his screen is.
see, my screen's behind me. That's projecting from here up to there.
Yeah.
I don't think we're set up to do that.
Maybe not. Somebody has control.
We'll have to,
So
Well,
you
that's all
really,
on his own system.
Yeah, that's on his-
it all.
in my system,
But, and there is something there.
see,
Yeah, but-
no, that's not on the, what you would do, you see, if I hosted
Yeah.
and Maggie wanted to show her slides, I have to then go over and I'm the one that would then give you control.
Right. And there is something there to do it. I'm just
Yeah.
not sure.
And it's all, but if I am the host, I can bring my screen up right there and bring it out to you.